This is my pal Scott Hughes, who I know had a long weekend and probably slept all day Sunday after going to church. Good morning.
Good morning.
Your voice is kind of scratchy. Got that little
Just woke
sexiness
him
to
up.
it.
Well, you get that wake-up call at 7:05.
My bad. Sorry about that. Scott Hughes is a political analyst. You're a great observer of some of the minutia of elections. And my first question to everybody is, anything surprise you?
The only real surprise to me was that John Bel Edwards did not get to 50%. I had been on the record before the election saying I felt he could get there. The polls were trending that way. He actually got to about 47%, I think, in the end. That was a real surprise. I think the other thing we talked about when I was here that wasn't being paid attention to was the Republican wave underneath, how the Republicans, I felt, were really putting their money and their effort in the Senate, which paid off. They really have won the Senate heavily. And then in a kind of a surprise move, the Republicans have an outside shot now to have a double majority. They can have a supermajority in the House and in the Senate with one win in the House.
Wow, they are that close.
Yeah, I think they got to 68 in the House on Saturday night. There's one more they're going to win, which would be 69. And then I think there's one they have an outside shot to get to 70, which would be the two-thirds majority in the House. And I think they're there in the Senate. And so the governor's race in many regards can become moot because if the Republicans control double majority, supermajority in the House and the Senate, they can get around a veto. And so we're looking at some very interesting politics ahead before we even get to what you want to talk about, which is the governor's race.
Okay. The numbers of turnout, etc., about 20% more than 4 years ago. Was that surprising to you?
It was a little surprising to me. I haven't crunched the numbers a whole lot. I did rest, as you say, on Sunday,
Right.
and I let the numbers set a little bit. What I saw immediately is the turnout on Saturday night was higher than the turnout 4 years ago. You said 20%. I'll go with that. It seemed to equate the turnout that came out for the runoff 4 years ago. Remember, 4 years ago, we had a lower turnout in the primary, and it actually went up in the runoff, which is sort of counterintuitive. Normally, it goes down in the runoff. And so it was up a little bit. We'll wait and see if did more people go early vote? Did we hit the cap in voting? Either way, it was more beneficial to the Republicans.
Okay. One more gubernatorial question, and then I want to talk about some local races. Who's going to win?
Well, I'm a big structure guy. I think the race structurally sets up in Risponi's favor, as odd as that sounds, a guy that gets 27, 28%. The race will favor him at this point because historically the runoff goes smaller, more conservative boxes, which should favor the Republican. But you're looking at John Bell, who, you look at historical numbers, governors that get, generally you say 45%, but he's at 47. Most governors getting 47% can get reelected. It'll be difficult for him. I think you were talking on the way out. I was listening. I think it was Greg Adams you had on the show.
Yeah, he was saying that some Republicans actually were crossing over and voting for John Bell.
You have some crossover vote. I think the real problem is going to be that Risponi got through the first round without being attacked. His opponent, Abraham, did not have the money to attack him.
And he wasn't gonna.
And said he wouldn't. And he honored that, Dan. I think that Edwards had no desire to attack Risponi. This is the matchup he'd rather have. I think he would have had a tougher matchup against Abraham, so he left him alone. The governor was going. He had a runoff guarantee. He didn't need to pull that trigger. But I think we're going to find out the second round how Risponi made his money. You're going to see the attacks on Edwards. You've already seen that card played. They're going to come after him on some of the women's sexual assault issues. They got the budget issues. He's going to say he's conservative, but when the PACs get involved, when the national money comes in, you're going to find out. And I don't do that job for the campaigns, but I'll just say I think you're going to find out who Risponi is and how he made his money, and he has not been attacked yet. And there's going to be some attacks specifically on some of the companies he's run, the way he's run his money, which may be at odds with some of the policies he's claiming that he stands for.
Well, the new and fresh approach, both for Abraham and for Risponi, was a big appeal. But he won't be new next time. I mean, he's been coming up here. People going Eddie. If we get to know him, we may find out there's some skeletons in the closet. We may find out there's a connection with his brother. God only knows what's coming out next.
Yeah, he's got some things in his closet. Let's just say that, Dan. They'll all come out, and you'll learn how he made his money. The other problem I think he's going to have structurally is he basically is running as an outsider. His whole campaign is, I'm not a politician. Abraham had every endorsement you could have. He had the traditional Republican clan. And so now, how do you close ranks? How do the people that voted and supported Abraham come over and support the guy that's not a politician, the guy that says politicians are the problem, and now they all have to rally around him? This could be a very interesting governor's race. I think you give the edge to Risponi if you're betting in Vegas, but I wouldn't sell John Bel Edwards short.
Did you get the feeling that the president coming to Lake Charles, he couldn't really decide, but he was there largely because of Ralph Abraham and not necessarily Risponi? You think he'll be behind Risponi? Risponi's tried to identify with the president.
I think the president wants to be a winner. Is he wants to be a winner? He wants to look like he has that influence still, and he's still playing. I think the president's playing re-election. I mean, he's got some problems of his own in Washington. We've heard about, and so he's trying to get out and make these rallies. And the president came to Louisiana for his own benefit, and it wasn't missed on Saturday night. The president tried to immediately take credit for this runoff.
Oh yeah, he tweeted it, absolutely, and he says he's coming 2 more times to Louisiana. We'll see.
I think he'll show up, but I think Dan is on to something. He's got a candidate now that may not be as winnable as the other candidate.
Okay, local races. Let's start with the legislative races. John Milkovich soundly defeated by the Republican in that race. How big a surprise was that to you?
No surprise. I think we talked before the election. Milkovich was in trouble. He is a conservative, but that district really didn't set up well for him, and they came after him big time. I'll say this: the only surprise to me is that Milligan did win it outright. I thought there'd be a runoff. I think John Milkovich in the end was fighting more with Katrina Early to hang on to second place than he was competing for first place. But I think in some regards, we're lucky that race is over because clearly the people there had a decision. Was surprised that Milligan got over 50%.
Okay.
You think it really is over?
In terms of that race being over?
Oh, Milkovich is going to challenge because it's really close. It's like, double-digit numbers in terms of the over 50%.
Well, I'll say it this way, Dan. The race may not be over, but I think Milligan will be your next senator in that district.
Okay.
I think very, very, very seldom do you overturn elections.
Yeah.
Gaddy and Mills. I think Mills was 10 points ahead of Gaddy. Accurate?
Mills was 10 points up on Gaddy. This one is fascinating, and this one I don't think is over, Dan. Just to go back in history, it's going to be harder for Ryan Gaddy this time, but Gaddy finished second last time. If you want to put the spin on this for Gaddy, Gaddy's number is actually higher this time than it was 4 years ago in the primary, and so he's going to play that card. I do think it spells a little trouble for Gaddy. I think that Mills was a lot stronger than Gaddy thought that he would be. There is a third candidate in this race. Again, an African-American Democrat, a lady ran out of the Webster area. She got significant votes, would certainly hurt Gaddy. But I think in the end, Gaddy's going to have a little problem here. I think Gaddy is in that labeling. I think we heard Greg talking about earlier of he's a Republican, but he's been labeled as a liberal, and that's going to be really hard to overcome in North Bossier.
Okay, some of the local races for the Caddo Commission. John Paul Young winning outright in that district. How big a surprise was that?
Little surprise. I think John Paul Young, in hindsight, was a lot like Governor Edwards. He was kind of guaranteed a runoff spot. We didn't really see him campaigning real heavy, so it seems like a surprise that he won. But I think he clearly thought his numbers in that district with his previous races, and of course his dad and the name there in the district. I think he well, what's surprising is how non-competitive the other two were, that he could win this outright because they ran a campaign. He really did not, and he wins, and a lot of that's carryover from his previous race.
He's the only one who knocked on my door, though.
Yeah, and so he worked his area, and so...
Ken Epperson going back to his spot.
Little surprise there, and I will tell you, I was with some of the Democratic Party folks Saturday night because they were in and out of the studio where I was at, and they were surprised on that race. I think Epperson winning that race was surprised even some of the Democrats. But this is now Ken's third time to come back to the commission, so he shouldn't be surprised that he can keep winning even in different districts.
Lynn Cawthorn.
I'm shocked on that one. Now, a lot of folks that studied that race said Lynn was going to win. Lynn's very popular. I personally struggle with someone that's under indictment running for office. I do believe innocent till proven guilty. Everyone's entitled to that. But this is one of those cases where I thought there would be a punishment at the ballot box, and there just wasn't. His voters seem happy with him.
If he's convicted, does he resigns, I assume, or his fellow commissioners force him out? Well, I know we're moving the clock ahead, but
what we've seen in this area, without getting into some of the past and dredging up names, we've seen a history where if you're an elected official and you're in this situation, that's a negotiating chip you have. you in return for resigning your seat up front, you get a little leniency from the court. And I expect if it goes that way, that's where Lim will go. But again, innocent till proven guilty. So we'll let this is federal, I think. We'll let the feds work this out.
November 16th. What are you watching the closest?
And the governor's race. I think the 16th will be about the governor's race, and then locally it'll be about the tax bond issue. A lot of folks, I think, were surprised that wasn't on the ballot when they showed up Saturday. We've had so much talk about this bond issue, but that would be the big Shreveport thing. And now that bond issue may have an impact on the governor's race because a lot of the race is cleared, as we say, and so there's not going to be there wasn't a lot on the ballot anyway to begin with in some places. Now there's less.
What about the motivation for people to show up for or against the bond issue affecting the numbers here?
I think
turnout.
I think people showing up for or against the bond issue will put our numbers a little higher. Probably will affect Rispone a little bit more. I think the voter that wants to come to vote against the bond issue will be more Rispone, and those type of issues have a big impact. I think if you go back Saturday night, one of the things that we were watching it, we knew it. You had the St. George issue in Baton Rouge.
That's
and so
incredible.
That created a lot of turnout in South Baton Rouge, which certainly helped some candidates more than others. The bond issue will have that kind of a bounce effect here. There'll be people come out for or against that bond issue, and it will have some effect in the governor's race. But as we saw Saturday night, the governor's race is really won or lost in Orleans, and turnout was definitely down in Orleans, looked to be below 38%, 37%, which when the rest of the state went 45, that really hurt the governor.
What was the Caddo turnout percentage?
Someone told me it was at around 40. I haven't really crunched the numbers, but I did not see a large Caddo turnout. Commissioner Stephen Jackson and I were on air together Saturday night, and we were talking about that during one of the breaks, and he had been around a lot of the African-American precincts and just did not see the turnout in our community. I didn't see it in the precincts where I go, and so we'll see the final numbers, but I think turnout was down